Newark Liberty International Airport was loud and crowded, as always on a Friday evening. People streamed towards their weekend getaways. Business travelers were returning home, and tourists besieged the check-in counters with enormous suitcases. Camille ran, weaving through passengers, desperately clutching her boarding pass. Her heels clacked loudly on the marble floor, and her heavy bag painfully bumped against her hip. As she ran, she brushed a rebellious blonde strand of hair from her face. Despite her age, she had maintained her natural hair color, a fact she was secretly proud of. It was perhaps the only part of her appearance that required no special care, unlike her figure, which she had meticulously guarded with manic stubbornness since turning 40. Final call for the flight to Boston, an indifferent female voice announced over the loudspeakers, and the voice seemed filled with a hidden malicious glee. Camille quickened her pace, her heart pounding somewhere in her throat. Only one thought pulsed in her mind: she couldn't be late. Absolutely not. Her mother's 70th birthday. This was not an event to miss, especially since she had postponed this trip for almost half a year, constantly finding new excuses. Particularly when you're an only daughter and your relationship with your mother has always been complicated, full of unspoken grievances and poorly concealed disappointments. "Stop. Wait," she called out when she saw an airport employee in a blue uniform skirt decisively closing the gate, as if to put an end to her efforts to make it. Boarding closed, the girl in uniform replied dryly, glancing at her wristwatch as if time were her personal ally in the battle against late passengers. "You're 20 minutes late. The plane doors are already shut." "But I had reasons," Camille said, feeling sweat trickle down her back and her blouse cling uncomfortably. "My husband, he suddenly fell ill. I had to call an ambulance. Can't someone contact the crew?" The employee looked at her with the polite indifference of someone who heard thousands of similar stories every day. Behind her cold gaze, Camille saw weariness and disinterest. A conveyor belt of human dramas. Eternal haste, always the same excuses. "The next flight is tomorrow morning at 8:45 a.m. You can rebook at the airline service counter, number 27. She gestured towards the main hall. Camille felt tears welling up in her eyes. It was always like this. Just when you relaxed and thought everything was going according to plan, life tripped you up. She pulled her worn leather phone case from her bag. A gift from Grant last Christmas, one of the rare times he had truly guessed the right present, and dialed her mother's number, imagining her disappointment. The long rings sounded especially hopeless in the noisy airport. No one answered. She's probably already preparing for the guests, slicing her famous pot roast and mashed potatoes, setting the festive table with the old fine china and crystal that only came out for special occasions, she thought bitterly. "Mom, forgive me," Camille whispered as the voicemail picked up. I missed the flight. I'll be on the first plane tomorrow morning, I promise." As Camille shuffled towards the airport exit, feeling like an absolute failure, happy people with suitcases walked past her. Hugs were exchanged, children laughed. It seemed the whole world was celebrating Friday, and only she was excluded from the general commotion. And then, a husky female voice with a distinct accent called out, "Pretty girl, wait a moment." Camille turned, instinctively clutching her bag tighter. Leaning against a marble pillar, as if she had deliberately chosen a spot in the shadows, stood a small, stout woman in a long, colorful skirt and a scarf tied around her head. The vibrant colors of her clothes, red, green, yellow, stood in stark contrast to the gray marble of the airport, looking as out of place as wildflowers in a hospital room. The woman looked to be around 60, perhaps even older. Deep wrinkles creased her dark face like a dried riverbed. Yet, her dark eyes were astonishingly clear and piercing, as if they could see right through you, reading thoughts and memories like an open book. "No, thank you, I'm in a hurry," Camille replied, quickening her pace and gripping her bag strap tighter. The thought of her wallet flashed through her mind. I need to hold onto my bag. Just what I needed, a fortune teller. To complete my perfect day she thought, annoyed. "You won't catch that plane anyway," the woman scoffed with such certainty that Camille involuntarily slowed. "But you can still run into trouble if you just keep going now. Great misfortune awaits you, my dear." Camille stopped against her will, fascinated. Something in the strange woman's voice had made her pause. Either the unusual emphasis or the strange certainty with which she spoke of the plane Camille had indeed missed. "What do you mean?" she asked, already cursing herself for falling for an obvious trick. The woman approached slowly, as if she had all the time in the world. She smelled of herbs and something sweet from childhood, perhaps caramel candies that her grandmother always kept in a vase on the sideboard next to the crystal glasses and faded photos of relatives in wooden frames. "I see your soul is not at peace," the woman spoke softly, almost whispering, and Camille involuntarily leaned closer to hear her words over the airport noise. "And rightly so, not everything is well at your home. Your nest is not solid. It's stitched with rotten threads." "Everyone has problems," Camille shrugged, but for some reason, she didn't leave. Something about this woman prevented her from simply turning and walking away. A strange authority, a certainty in her words, as if she really knew something important. "Your husband, you say, is sick." The woman narrowed her eyes, her gaze becoming thin slits like a sated cat's. "Oh, he does not suffer from a sickness that doctors can cure. Your husband suffers from lies. His heart is eaten away by deceit like a tree by termites." Camille flinched. She felt a shiver run down her spine. She had indeed lied to the airport employee. Grant was not sick. He had just been delayed at an important meeting and couldn't drive her to the airport as they had planned 3 days ago. And the last-minute taxi she called had been hopelessly stuck in Friday rush-hour traffic on I-95. "What do you want?" Camille asked wearily, glancing at her watch. If she left now, she might still be able to call her mother from the road and explain the situation. The woman pulled a small bundle wrapped in a piece of dark, worn cloth from the deep pocket of her skirt. "Take this, beautiful girl." She handed Camille the bundle with a gesture as if offering a royal jewel. An old needle, still my grandmother's, made of silver with a special eye. "They don't make them like this anymore. When you get home, test your sick husband, and you will understand everything. The needle will show you the truth." "I don't believe in such things," Camille began, feeling foolish. Her mother had always said such people were masters of manipulation, and now she had fallen into the trap herself. "You don't have to believe," the woman interrupted, her voice unexpectedly hard. "Just take it and test it. If I'm wrong, throw it away, and if I'm right, at least you'll open your eyes before it's too late." Camille didn't understand why she reached out and took the bundle. Perhaps from fatigue and despair, or perhaps from a strange premonition stirring deep within her. The bundle was light, almost weightless, but it felt significant. "How much do I owe you?" she asked, opening her purse, preparing for the woman to demand an exorbitant sum. "Give me $2 for good luck," the woman smiled, revealing irregular teeth, one of which was gold and gleamed dully in the airport lights. Camille was about to offer a higher denomination, but the woman shook her head as if Camille had offered something absurd. $2, daughter, no more, no less." In Camille's wallet, a stray $2 coin was found among credit cards and bills. The woman took it, tossing it up and down in her palm to test its weight. Camille noticed a deep scar running from her wrist to the middle of her palm, as if someone had once tried to slit her veins. "The rest is for you," she whispered with a mysterious smile. "Go with God and remember. Test your husband with the needle. Test him. It will show you the whole truth, no matter how bitter." When Camille turned at the terminal exit, the woman had vanished, as if she had dissolved into thin air among the tourists with suitcases and hurried people, like a mirage in the desert. For a moment, Camille even doubted if she had imagined this strange encounter. In the taxi on the way home, watching the passing lights of evening Queens, she unwrapped the bundle. Inside was indeed an unusual needle, long, with a silvery sheen and a strange eye-like opening. Barely visible patterns were engraved on its surface, looking like intricate letters of an unknown alphabet. Camille snorted and put the needle into her handbag, closing the inner pocket. Fooled like an idiot, she thought, but for some reason, she felt uneasy, as if a countdown timer had started somewhere inside her. The taxi stopped outside her apartment building in Queens. The 12-story, 90s-era high-rise, with peeling plaster in places and an perpetually broken elevator, looked especially bleak in the setting sun. She and Grant had dreamed of moving into something nicer, one of those new complexes with security and underground parking that were mushrooming across the city. But they just couldn't manage to save enough money for a down payment. Though Grant often said a big deal was on the horizon, one that would solve all their financial problems once and for all. As she climbed the stairs to the 7th floor, the elevator, as usual, had been out of order for 3 weeks, and no one was even attempting to fix it. Camille recalled the woman's words, "Test your sick husband, and you will understand everything."
Wat Nonsense.
Grant had never been a model husband. He forgot anniversaries, rarely gave her flowers, sometimes drank more than he should with friends. But lately, he really was working a lot. New partners, projects, endless meetings and negotiations. Today, she had simply had bad luck. It could happen to anyone. After all, they had almost 15 years of marriage behind them. It hadn't always been smooth sailing, but when she opened the apartment door, she froze on the threshold, feeling her heart skip a beat. A light was on in the hall, and voices, muffled but clear, came from the living room. One of them definitely belonged to her husband, the same man who had called 2 hours ago, apologizing that he was stuck in an important meeting near Midtown and couldn't drive her. The second voice was male, deep and hoarse, as if its owner smoked a lot. Camille froze, not daring to enter her own apartment. Her heart pounded in her throat. So, Grant's important meeting was happening right here in their living room. Betrayal washed over her like a suffocating wave. She carefully closed the front door, trying not to make a sound, and crept on tiptoe down the hall. Fragments of conversation drifted from the living room. "This can't go on, Grant," the unknown voice said with a metallic undertone. "The Grey isn't the type to wait around. Deadlines are approaching."
I understand, Scott.
"I understand everything." In her husband's voice, Camille heard tones she had never noticed before. Submissive, almost pleading. "Just one more week, 2 at most.
The money will definitely be there.
I'm telling you for the last time." 2 weeks, the guest cut him off. "After that, you won't be asking for my forgiveness." Camille quietly crept along the hall and peered through the gap between the not-quite-closed door and the frame. In the living room sat 2 men, her husband, hunched with a pathetic smile on his face, and a burly man around 50 with close-cropped graying hair and a square jaw. He was expensively but tastelessly dressed, a leather jacket, a massive gold chain around his neck. "Care for a drink?" Grant suggested, jumping up to pour whiskey into a glass. "To a successful deal. Stay calm." The man drank it in one gulp, without batting an eye. "And why did you send your wife to Boston? Trying to hide her from us?" Grant laughed nervously. "Oh, nothing. It's my mother-in-law's 70th birthday. You know how it is, can't not go." "And why didn't you go yourself? Or are you afraid to leave the business?" Camille felt anger boil within her. So, he hadn't just lied to her today. He had used her mother's birthday as a pretext for some shady dealings. "Test your sick husband." The woman's words echoed in her mind again. She instinctively fumbled in her bag for the strange needle. "Oh, come on, Scott." Grant's voice became quite pitiful. "I just need to meet with an important client. A big contract is looming." "Aha," the guest snorted. "And that client is probably the lowlife you owe the Grey $150,000 because of."
"Stop lying, Grant, we know everything about you."
Camille recoiled from the door and clapped a hand over her mouth. $150,000. Grant owed someone such a sum. For what? Their shared budget barely covered bills and an occasional last-minute vacation to Mexico. "I know what I'm doing." Her husband's voice already sounded more confident.
"I have everything under control."
"The money will be here soon." "That would be good." The guest rose heavily. "It would be very good because, you know, family is sacred. It would be a shame if something were to happen." It sounded like an open threat. Camille retreated to the bathroom and quietly closed the door behind her. She was trembling. What was this man talking about? Who was the Grey? And where did this massive debt come from? She turned on the water to mask her presence with its rush and leaned her forehead against the cool tiles. Camille took the needle from her bag and turned it in her hands. What did the woman mean when she said, "Test your husband"? How could one test a person with a needle? Camille looked around the bathroom helplessly, as if searching for a clue. Suddenly, her gaze fell on the laundry basket, where Grant's shirt lay, the same one he had worn to a business dinner yesterday. Following a strange impulse, Camille took the shirt and carefully examined the collar.
Lipstick marks? No, nothing of the sort.
She ran her fingers over the empty pockets. Then, without knowing why, she took the needle and carefully pricked the fabric of the sleeve. To her surprise, the needle seemed to be drawn to the inner seam on its own. And when Camille held the shirt up to the light, she noticed that the seam there was different from the others, as if something was sewn inside it. She took a nail scissors and carefully opened the seam. Inside, a tiny paper bundle appeared. As she unfolded it with trembling fingers, Camille saw several strange pills and a note with a phone number. Her husband was hiding drugs in his clothes. Or were these some kind of prohibited substances? Her head reeled. At that moment, she heard the front door click shut. The guest had left. Then she heard her husband's footsteps approaching the bathroom. "Camille," she heard Grant's surprised voice from the other side of the door. "Are you home? What about the flight?" She quickly put the needle and the discovery into the pocket of her bathrobe, which was hanging on a hook, and splashed water on her face. "Missed it," she replied, trying to make her voice sound normal. The taxi was stuck in traffic. The door opened, and Grant appeared on the threshold, a tall man of 48 with a neatly trimmed beard streaked with gray and a receding hairline that he carefully disguised with a special hairstyle. Once, she had found him attractive, but now she only noticed the bags under his eyes and a nervous smile. "Oh, too bad," he said without looking her in the eye. "Your mother will probably be disappointed." "And you, I see, aren't particularly disappointed," Camille couldn't help but say. "You were having your own meeting here." Grant tensed but quickly regained his composure. "Oh, just a colleague who picked up some documents. I told you I was working today." A colleague. Camille felt everything boiling inside her, with a gold chain and talking about a certain Gray. Her husband's face changed, becoming hard and unfamiliar. "Were you eavesdropping?" "I came home and heard a conversation," she parried, "in my own apartment, by the way." "Who is that man, Grant? And what about the $150,000 you owe someone?" Grant looked around as if searching for an escape route. Then he sighed heavily and went into the bedroom. Camille followed him, still holding the discovery in her bathrobe pocket. "It's hard to explain," he began, sitting on the edge of the bed and burying his head in his hands. "Try." Camille crossed her arms over her chest. "I have time. I already missed my flight." "I owe a man money," Grant said reluctantly. "A large sum. I invested in a business, but everything went wrong."
What kind of business?
Camille felt nauseous.
Are you gambling?
Making bets.
No.
He looked up. "I'm not that stupid." It was a deal, a lucrative contract, worth over $1.5 million. She shook her head in disbelief. "And where did you get so much money?" Grant fell silent, avoiding her gaze. Camille felt a shiver run down her spine.
Grant, she said softly.
"Did you take out a loan? Mortgage the apartment?"
No.
He stared at the floor. I borrowed it from Blake. With interest."
From a gangster.
Camille stared at her husband in horror. "You got involved with gangsters?"
Have you lost your mind?
"He's not a gangster, he's a businessman," Grant countered unconvincingly. "He just has his own methods." "And what would those be?" She clenched her fists. "Threatening the debtor's family?"
I heard everything, Grant.
"That Scott hinted pretty clearly that something could happen to me." Her husband jumped up and grabbed her by the shoulders.
"Nothing will happen to you. I'll fix everything."
"I have a plan."
What plan?
Camille pulled away from him.
Selling drugs.
She took the paper bundle with the pills from her bathrobe pocket. Grant's face contorted in astonishment. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. "From your shirt," she replied, backing towards the door. "Are these drugs?" "Yes." Grant shook his head. "No, these are performance-enhancing pills. They help you concentrate." Many business people take them. And that's why you hide them in the lining of your shirt? Camille smiled bitterly. Who do you take me for, Grant? At that moment, Grant's phone rang. He looked at the display and turned pale. I have to take this, he muttered, leaving the room. Camille stood there, stunned by everything that had happened. Her life was falling apart before her eyes. The man she had lived with for almost 15 years was not who she thought he was. He had gotten into debt with gangsters, had gotten involved with some dubious pills. And what else didn't she know about him? Grant's muffled voice came from the hall. Yes, I understand. No, everything will be on time. Of course, I have the situation under control. Camille went to the cabinet and opened the drawer with documents. Something told her she had to dig deeper. Marriage certificate, insurance policies, old receipts. And there was the folder with bank statements. She quickly flipped through the pages and froze when she saw unknown figures. Large sums were regularly debited from their joint account, into which her salary as a music teacher was deposited. And not just in recent months. This had been going on for several years. Test with the needle. Again, the woman's words came to mind. Well, the needle had indeed helped uncover the first secret. What else could it show? Camille sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the bank statements. In the last 3 years, over $100,000 had vanished from their account. $100,000. And she had thought they simply couldn't save for a new apartment because of Grant's irregular income. Every time she talked about major purchases, her husband would shake his head and say, "Not now, Camille. We have to wait until business picks up." And he, in the meantime, what had he done with this money? Camille feverishly ran through the possibilities. Gambling, another woman, or these pills he was hiding in the lining of his shirt. When had her life become a crime movie? The phone call in the hall ended, and Camille hastily put the documents back in the folder. A moment later, Grant entered the room, agitated and with red blotches on his cheeks. "We need to talk," he said without preamble.
I'm listening.
Camille tried to keep her voice calm, though inside everything was seething. Grant nervously rubbed the bridge of his nose. A gesture she knew. He always did that when he was about to lie. "I do owe Blake money, a man everyone just calls the Grey. He finances various projects. I had a very promising idea, an eco-friendly technology for plastic recycling. We could have made a lot of money." And what happened? Grant spread his arms. The partner ran off with the money. The equipment was faulty. In short, everything went south. He spoke quickly, without looking her in the eye. Camille felt the familiar cold distrust that had settled between them in recent years. Strange that she only realized it now. "And the pills?" she asked. "Why are you hiding them?" "They're just nootropics," he shrugged with feigned nonchalance. "For brain activity. Not entirely legal to get without a prescription, so you have to get them through contacts." "And that's why you hide them in the lining of your shirt?" "I didn't want you to worry," he tried to smile, but it came out crooked. "And the money from our account?" Camille pulled out the folder with the statements. "Where did the $100,000 go, Grant?" He turned pale. "Were you rummaging through my documents?" "Our documents," she corrected him. "And this is our joint account, where, by the way, I also deposit my salary." Grant ran his fingers through his hair. Another familiar gesture, a sign of extreme nervousness. "I needed the money for the project's development," he said uncertainly. "I plan to pay it all back with interest once the business took off." "And how much do you owe this Blake now?"
$15,000.
He looked away. "Plus interest, so more." Camille felt a wave of despair wash over her. "How much, Grant?" "Roughly $200,000 to date," he confessed, his voice trembling. "But I have a plan. Scott said the Grey is willing to wait 2 more weeks." "And what are you going to do?"
Rob a bank.
Camille couldn't suppress the sarcasm. "I got a tip for a good deal." He became animated, a feverish glint in his eyes. "A contact, Stanley, offered me to participate in a shipment of electronics from abroad. No customs, you understand? The net profit could be 3 to 4 times the investment.
Smuggling.
Camille stared at her husband in horror. You want to get involved in smuggling? It's not as bad as it sounds. He sat next to her on the bed. Just a small circumvention of customs regulations. Everyone does it. Camille looked at Grant and didn't recognize the man she had married. Her husband, a middle manager at a construction materials company, wanted to get involved in smuggling to buy his way out of debt with gangsters. This is surreal. And what if it doesn't work? She asked softly. What if this deal falls through, like the last one? What then? Grant remained silent, and that silence was more bitter than any words. They threatened me. Yes, Camille realized. That's why you insisted so much that I fly to my mother.
You wanted Emil out of the way.
I wanted to protect you, he mumbled. The Grey doesn't mess around when it comes to money. At that moment, the doorbell rang. They both flinched. Are you expecting anyone? Camille whispered. Grant shook his head. His face was gray with fear. No one. Maybe the neighbors. The doorbell rang again, more insistently. Grant got up and walked unsteadily to the door. Camille followed him, clutching the silver needle in her pocket. On the threshold stood a stocky man in a leather jacket and dark sunglasses, even though it was already evening. Camille knew immediately that this was no neighbor. Mr. Grant Reimer? The stranger asked. Yes, her husband's voice was strained. Come with us, we need to talk. The man spoke softly, almost without moving his lips. Where? Grant clung to the doorframe.
I'm not going anywhere.
Don't make trouble. The stranger slightly pushed aside the hem of his jacket, and Camille saw with horror the handle of a pistol. The Grey is waiting. Just a conversation. Camille, Grant said hoarsely.
Don't turn around, lock the door, and don't go anywhere. I'll be back soon.
He stepped over the threshold, and the door clicked shut. Camille rushed to the window. From the 7th floor, she could see the courtyard. She could just make out Grant being put into a black Mercedes. Only one thought hammered in her head. What to do? Call the police? They wouldn't believe the story of the mysterious gangster Blake, who had kidnapped her husband. And Grant, what if they killed him because of her call? Camille ran through the apartment, unable to find peace. In all this, there was something unreal, as if she had landed in a cheap action movie. Just this morning, she had been an ordinary woman, rushing to catch a plane to congratulate her mother on her birthday. And now? Her cell phone rang. The display showed Mom. Camille took a deep breath and tried to compose herself. Hello, Mom. Camille, where are you? Her mother's voice sounded worried. The plane landed ages ago, and you're not here. Camille faltered. What should she say? Mom, I missed the flight, and then I found out my husband owes gangsters money, and he was just picked up by men with guns. I missed the flight. I'll be there first thing tomorrow. What happened? Her mother, as always, sensed that something was wrong. Your voice sounds strange. Everything's fine, Camille lied. I'm just tired. Traffic was terrible in New York. I barely made it home. And where's Grant? He has a business meeting. The words were hard to utter. On a Friday evening? Her mother's voice held suspicion. He's been having a lot of these meetings lately. Her mother had never made a secret of the fact that she didn't think Grant was the best match for her daughter. He's slippery somehow, she always said. His eyes wander. Perhaps a mother's heart had sensed what Camille had refused to see all these years. Mom, I'll call you back later.
All right.
Camille felt like she was about to burst into tears. I just need to sort out the tickets. After she ended the call, she sank onto the sofa and buried her face in her hands. What to do? Where to go? Who should she turn to for help? Something pricked her in her bag. The silver needle. Camille pulled it out and turned it in her fingers. Test your husband, the woman had said. Well, she had tested him and learned what she hadn't wanted to know. Suddenly, an idea struck her. In the same bag, in an inner pocket, lay the business card of Tanner Maxwell, an old family friend. He used to work for the district attorney's office, and now, it seemed, in a special division of the police. They hadn't been in touch for several years, but perhaps he could help, at least offer advice on what to do. Camille found the business card and dialed the number. After a few rings, the familiar baritone answered. Maxwell, Tanner. Tanner, it's Camille. Camille Lehman, now Reimer. Camille. His voice held surprise. How long has it been? Has something happened? Yes. She choked back tears. Something has happened. I urgently need your help.
I'm listening.
His tone immediately turned serious. My husband was just picked up by some men, possibly gangsters. He owes a man nicknamed the Grey a large sum of money. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Blake? Tanner finally asked. A big guy with a grey beard? I don't know. I didn't see him, Camille confessed. I only know everyone calls him the Grey. Camille. Tanner's voice became tense. If that's the person I think it is, then this is serious. Blake is one of the main suppliers of synthetic drugs in the city. We've had our eye on him for a long time, but we lack the evidence. Camille felt a shiver run down her spine. Drugs? Were those the pills she had found? Tanner, I found some pills on my husband. She spoke quickly and haltingly. He said it was just nootropics for brain activity. Where are you now? Tanner asked sharply.
At my place.
Camille took the small bundle from her bathrobe pocket.
Wat schult du?
Don't go anywhere and don't open the door for anyone, Tanner said.
Il be tere in an hour.
And Camille, be careful. If those are Blake's people, they're not to be trifled with. When the call ended, Camille felt a paralysis take hold. Drugs. Her husband had gotten involved with drug dealers. All these years, she had lived next to a man she apparently didn't know at all. She stood up and went to the sideboard where their wedding photos stood, happy, smiling faces. She in a white lace wedding dress that she had chosen with her mother. Grant in a sharp suit with slicked back hair. Back then, he didn't have a receding hairline.
Irs ago, a liefetime.
On that day, she had been absolutely sure that she had found her husband, that a long happy life lay before them. Children, a house in the suburbs with a garden where apple and cherry trees would grow. But children never came. First, they postponed it for their careers, then health problems began, and then they just stopped talking about it, as with so many other things. When had their relationship become so empty? When had this wall of silence and unspoken things grown between them? And above all, when had Grant turned down this dark path? Or had he always been like this? And she had just not wanted to see it? Camille picked up the photo and ran her finger over her husband's smiling face. Asterisk, who are you really, Grant? And what should I do now? Asterisk, suddenly, her gaze fell on a strange detail. In the background of the photo stood a man she had never noticed before. Tall, bearded, with a piercing gaze. He looked directly into the camera, as if he knew she would be looking at this picture 15 years later. Camille held the photo closer to the light. Something about this man seemed familiar. She racked her brain, trying to remember where she might have seen him. And then it hit her. She rushed to her laptop and opened social media, a few search queries. And there it was. Blake Giorgio, businessman, philanthropist, owner of a chain of gyms and restaurants. In the photo was the same man as in the wedding picture, only older and with a fully grey beard. Grant had known Blake before their wedding, but why had he never mentioned it? And why was this man at her wedding? The doorbell rang, and Camille flinched. Was Tanner already here so fast, or were they Blake's people coming back for her?
Camille froze, staring at the door.
Her heart hammered in her throat. Asterisk, who was it? Tanner couldn't be here so quickly. Or was it Blake's people? Or maybe Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor? She always came at the most inconvenient times to borrow salt. Asterisk, who's there? She asked without approaching the door. Mrs. Reimer, an unknown male voice sounded. Please open up, police. She looked through the peephole. On the landing stood two men in plain clothes. One of them held up an ID badge. "Show the papers again," she requested. The man dutifully held the ID up to the peephole.
Major Voss, NYPD Narcotics Division.
Camille's heart skipped a beat. She slowly opened the door, leaving the chain on. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mrs. Reimer, we need to talk about your husband, Grant Reimer," the major said.
"May we come in?"
"How do you know?" "Tanner Maxwell informed us about your call," the second man explained. "He's currently on an operation in another district but will join us later. This matter cannot wait." Camille hesitated. Could she trust them? But if Tanner had sent them, all right. She unhooked the chain and stepped aside. The men entered the apartment. Major Voss was tall and muscular, with a short haircut and an observant gaze. His colleague, younger and with a neat beard, introduced himself as Lieutenant Klimov. "Where are the substances you found?" Voss asked without preamble. Camille took the paper bundle from her bathrobe pocket. "Here," she handed it to the major. "I found this in the lining of my husband's shirt." Voss carefully took the bundle, unwrapped it, and nodded to his colleague. The latter pulled out a small case with chemical reagents from his briefcase. "This is methylene dioxypyrovalerone," the lieutenant said after a quick test. Slang for bath salts. "A highly potent synthetic drug." "But my husband said it was nootropics," Camille said, confused. "The classic excuse of a dealer," Voss explained. "Mrs. Reimer, where is your husband now?" "He was kidnapped." She felt a lump form in her throat. "A man came about an hour ago and took him. He had a gun." "Describe this man," Voss said, pulling out a notepad. "Stocky, in a leather jacket and dark sunglasses. They left in a black Mercedes. I saw it from the window. And he didn't say where they were going. He said the Grey wanted to talk." Camille sank into a chair, suddenly feeling weak. "Is it true that Blake is a drug dealer?" The police officers exchanged glances. "How do you know that name?" Voss asked cautiously. Camille hesitated. She didn't want to tell them about her internet search. That would look strange. "Tanner said his name is Blake Giorgio." "That's correct," the major nodded. "Blake Giorgio, known in certain circles as the Grey. Officially, a successful businessman, owner of a chain of gyms and restaurants. Unofficially, one of the biggest suppliers of synthetic drugs in New York and the surrounding area." "And my husband?" Camille couldn't finish the sentence. "From what we know, your husband works for Blake," Lieutenant Klimov said softly, "possibly as a dealer." Camille remembered the pills in the shirt lining, her husband's regular business meetings, his nervousness. Everything recently fit together into a terrible picture. "But why?" she whispered. "He has a good job, a normal salary." "Unfortunately, many fall for this trick," Voss sighed. "They start small, think they can make quick money, and then they can't get out." Camille remembered the photo. "Wait." She stood up and took the wedding picture from the table. "Look, this man in the background, that's Blake, isn't it?" The major examined the photo carefully and nodded. "Yes, that's him. 15 years ago, judging by the date on the frame. How did he get into your wedding?"
"I don't know." Camille shook her head.
"I never noticed him in the picture before, and my husband never mentioned knowing him." "Interesting," Voss said thoughtfully, taking a photo of the picture with his phone. "This could be an important lead." At that moment, Camille's cell phone rang. The display showed Grant. She looked at the police officers helplessly. "Answer it," Voss nodded, "but put it on speaker." Camille answered the call and pressed the speaker icon. "Hello." Her voice trembled.
"Camille."
Her husband's voice sounded strange, as if he were in a large empty room. "Listen carefully and don't interrupt me." "Okay." She met the major's gaze, who gestured for her to continue the conversation. "I need you to get the money," Grant spoke quickly. "In the bedroom, under the floorboard by the cabinet, there's $20,000. Drive to Stanley's place, I'll text you the address. Give him the money and tell him I'm asking him to activate Plan B. He'll understand. Grant, what's going on? Camille couldn't hold back. Where are you? Doesn't matter, he interrupted her. Do what I said. This is our only chance. A chance for what? To stay alive. His voice dropped to a whisper. The Grey knows about the needle, Camille. He knows what you found. And he's very angry. Camille turned ice cold. How could Blake know about the needle, and what did knows what you found mean? Grant, wait. No time, he interrupted her. Do what I said and be careful. You might be watched. The call ended. Camille stared at her phone in horror. What needle? Foss asked. And what did you find? Camille pulled out the silver needle and told them about the strange encounter with the woman at the airport. Sounds like a clue, Lieutenant Klimov said thoughtfully, or a prearranged signal. What does Plan B mean? Foss asked. And who is this Stanley? I don't know, Camille replied honestly. My husband mentioned a Stanley in connection with smuggling electronics. He said it was their chance to buy their way out of debt with Blake. The Major tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. We need to check what's under that floorboard, he said. Show us exactly where. They went into the bedroom. Camille pointed to the spot by the cabinet. Somewhere here, but I never knew about a hiding place. Lieutenant Klimov knelt down and carefully examined the floor. One of the floorboards wasn't nailed down. It could be carefully lifted and removed. Beneath it, a shallow niche was revealed, containing a sealed envelope. That doesn't look like $20,000, Camille remarked. Foss carefully opened the envelope. Inside were a USB stick and a note. If anything happens to me, Camille, forgive me. This is the only way to make everything right. What's on the stick? Camille asked. We're about to find out. Foss took out his laptop from his bag and connected the stick. It contained only one folder with documents. Account transactions, photos of meetings with various people, among whom Camille recognized Blake, and a video file. Foss started the video. Grant appeared on the screen. He was sitting at the table in their kitchen. Judging by the date in the corner of the screen, the recording had been made 3 days ago. If you're seeing this, Camille, then things have gone terribly wrong, her husband said from the screen. I want you to know the truth. I am not who I pretended to be all these years. 15 years ago, a federal agency infiltrated me into Blake's organization. My job was to collect evidence of his criminal activities. But something went wrong. I truly fell in love with you, Camille, and decided to get out of the game, to start a new life. Camille stared at the screen, dumbfounded. Grant, a secret agent. That was nonsense. Blake found out I was a double agent, Grant continued in the video. And now he's threatening you. I had to protect you, that's why I insisted on your trip to your mother. This stick contains all the evidence against Blake that I collected over the years. Give it to Tanner Maxwell at the DEA. He's the only one you can trust. And one more thing. Find the mystic with the silver needle. She is our undercover agent. She will help you go underground. The code is, the needle found the heart. Forgive me for everything, Camille. I loved you. Truly. The video ended. Silence filled the room. What nonsense, Camille finally breathed out. Grant is not a secret agent. This is a stupid joke. Doesn't look like a joke, Foss said thoughtfully. But not exactly the truth either. What is it then? The Major closed the laptop. Possibly your husband is trying to wriggle out of this. He made up this story to justify his involvement in Blake's business. Or it's part of a plan. In any case, we need to find this Stanley. Camille's phone beeped in her pocket. A message from Grant with an address. A warehouse on the outskirts of the city. We're going there, Foss decided. But first, we'll wait for Tanner. If what your husband said is true and federal agencies are involved, we need backup. And what if it's a trap? Camille asked. What if they want to lure me there? We'll be nearby, Lieutenant Klimov assured her. Nothing will happen to you. Camille went to the window. Her head reeled from all the information. Who was the man she had lived with for 15 years, really? A criminal working for a drug lord, an undercover agent, or someone else entirely? And who was the woman with the silver needle? A random charlatan at the airport, or actually an agent? Camille remembered the moment she had felt the inner seam in Grant's shirt. A strange feeling, as if the needle had been drawn to that spot on its own. Had she not met the woman, had she not taken that needle, she would never have learned the truth about her husband. The needle found the heart, she mentally repeated the phrase from the video. What did it really mean? The doorbell rang. Major Foss cautiously went to the peephole. "It's Tanner," he said, opening the door. Tanner stood on the threshold, greatly aged since their last meeting, but still with the same steady gaze in his grey eyes. "Camille," he nodded to her, then turned to his colleagues. "What do we have?" Foss briefly described the situation and showed Grant's video message. "What nonsense," Tanner shook his head. "There are no secret agents in the Blake file, and there never have been. I've been on this operation from the beginning." "Perhaps it's other agencies," Lieutenant Klimov suggested.
Teia.
"Impossible," Tanner cut him off. "We have full coordination in the Blake case. This is just an invention to cover tracks." "But why?" Camille asked. "Why would Grant invent such a complicated story?" "So you'd believe him and hand over the stick," Tanner shrugged. "It's possible it doesn't even contain the files we saw. Maybe it's a virus or a program that will destroy the data on our servers. Blake employs very capable hackers." Camille felt everything slipping away from her. So it was true, Grant, a criminal working for a drug lord. All these years, she had lived with a man she didn't really know. Her phone vibrated again. Another message from Grant. "Time is running out. If you don't show up in an hour, Blake will kill me. Please, Camille. For everything that was between us." She showed the message to the police officers. "This could be a trap," Foss said. "But if your husband is really in danger." "We're going there," Tanner decided. "But you stay in the car, Camille. It's too dangerous." "No," she shook her head. "If it's a trap, they're waiting exactly for me. You can't deceive them." "We can't risk a civilian," Foss countered. "They won't believe I came alone," Camille insisted. "But they might believe I called a taxi. One of you could play the taxi driver." The police officers exchanged glances. "There's a certain logic to that," Tanner reluctantly admitted. "Klimov, do you have a civilian car?" "Yes, an old Toyota." "Excellent, you play the taxi driver. Foss and I will secure from outside." Camille nodded, feeling a strange calm. Just this morning, she had been an ordinary middle-aged woman, rushing to catch a plane, and now she was preparing for a special operation with the police. She looked at the silver needle again. The needle found the heart. Whatever that meant. She hoped she would find answers to all her questions today. Lieutenant Klimov's old Toyota drove slowly through an industrial area on the outskirts of the city. Camille sat in the back seat, nervously clutching the silver needle. Outside, bleak fences, old, dilapidated factories, and modern warehouses with colorful signs passed by. "Almost there," Klimov said, looking at the GPS. "Remember the plan?" "Yes." Camille nodded. "I'll go in, say I've come at my husband's request. If Grant is there, I'll try to find out what's going on. If not, I'll wait until you give the signal. And above all, no solo acts," the lieutenant reminded her. "At the slightest danger, say the code phrase, 'I need to go back to the car to get my phone.'" Camille nodded again, feeling her throat dry up. What was she doing here? She was driving to a meeting with drug dealers, with people who had weapons. Just this morning, her biggest problem had been getting to the airport on time to visit her mother for her birthday. And now? The Toyota stopped in front of a gray, one-story building with the inscription Luxury Auto Parts. The place looked perfectly normal. Nothing sinister, no signs that anything illegal was going on here. "We'll stay in touch." Klimov handed her a tiny earpiece. "Tanner and Foss are already in position. They'll hear and see everything. In case of emergency, the response team will be here in a minute." Camille put in the earpiece and got out of the car. Her legs felt like cotton, but she forced herself to walk to the entrance of the shop. Strangely, she now felt almost no fear. It was just a dull numbness and a wish for it all to be over as soon as possible. A bell chimed as she opened the door. Inside, it was indeed a perfectly normal auto parts store. Shelves with boxes, a counter behind which a bored young man with a stylish beard sat. "Good evening," he said, looking up from his phone. "How can I help you?" Camille faltered. "I'm looking for Stanley. I was sent by Grant Reimer." The young man's expression changed instantly. He straightened up and scrutinized Camille intently. "Do you have ID?" he asked. Camille took out her driver's license. The young man studied it carefully, then nodded and pressed a button under the counter. In the back of the store, a door opened that Camille had initially thought was part of a shelf. "Go through," he said. "Stanley is waiting for you." Camille walked through the door and found herself in a narrow corridor that ended at another door. Her heart pounded furiously, but she forced herself to continue. Behind the second door was a spacious office with modern furniture, the exact opposite of the unassuming shop. At a desk sat a tall man around 50 with a neatly trimmed beard and a penetrating gaze. "Mrs. Reimer," he stood up to greet her. "Finally."
I am Stanley Werner.
"Where is my husband?" she asked, looking around. "He called me, told me to come here." "Have a seat." Stanley gestured to an armchair opposite. "We have little time." Camille carefully sank into the armchair, not taking her eyes off the man. "Grant is with Blake," Stanley said in a hushed tone, "at one of his, let's call them safe houses. The situation is critical."
Who are you anyway?
Camille felt anger rising within her. "What do you have to do with my husband?" "I'm his handler," Stanley replied calmly. "Or I was, until everything went wrong."
Händler.
Camille frowned. "So it's true. Grant really is an agent." "Yes," Stanley nodded. "We infiltrated him into Blake's organization 15 years ago."
Operation Nedle.
Grant was supposed to collect evidence of Blake's criminal activities and his connections to an international drug cartel. But Tanner Maxwell said there were no secret agents in the Blake file, Camille countered. "Of course he said that," Stanley scoffed, "because he doesn't know. This was an operation by a different agency, not the DEA, and only a very limited number of people knew about it." Camille felt dizzy. So Grant hadn't lied in his video message. He had really been a secret agent all these years. "But then, our marriage?" she asked softly. "Was that part of the operation too?" Stanley was silent for a moment, as if choosing his words. "Initially? Yes," he finally said. "Blake monitored all his people. Grant needed a convincing cover story, a wife, a family life. All that made him less suspicious." Camille felt a tear run down her cheek. Years of her life had been a lie. Everything she had thought was real had just been part of a secret operation. "But then everything changed," Stanley continued. "Grant genuinely fell in love with you and started to sabotage the operation."
Sabotage?
"How?" "He stopped passing on important information, looked for ways to get out of the game, asked for a transfer to a different assignment, far away from Blake. He said he wanted a normal life with you." Camille listened in silence, unsure whether to believe this man. It all sounded like the plot of a cheap thriller. But then again, didn't the whole story with drugs, gangsters, and hiding places under the floorboards resemble a cheap thriller? "What happened today?" she asked. "Why was Grant kidnapped?" "Blake found out who he really is." Stanley tapped his fingers on the desk. "We have a mole in the organization. And he betrayed Grant. Now Blake wants to know what evidence was collected against him and who among his people still works for the intelligence agencies. And now we need the stick."
Stanley leaned forward.
"Grant said he gave it to you. It contains all the evidence collected over 15 years. Names, dates, sums, recorded conversations. With this material, we can not only arrest Blake but dismantle his entire network." In her earpiece, Tanner's voice sounded. "Don't believe him, Camille." Stole for time. We've almost figured out who he is. Camille coughed, trying to hide her agitation. The stick is in my bag, she lied. But first, I want to know where Grant is and what will happen to him. He's at one of Blake's restaurants, Stanley replied.
The Old Mill on the Hudson River front, in the Wiener Cellar.
As soon as we have the stick, the operation to free him will begin. Old Mill Restaurant on the Hudson Riverfront, she heard in the earpiece.
Wir checking the information.
How am I supposed to know you're telling the truth? Camille asked. Maybe you work for Blake. Maybe you're the mole. Stanley smiled. A smart woman. Grant didn't fall in love with you for nothing. He pulled an old photo from his desk drawer and handed it to Camille. Do you recognize this? The picture showed Grant, much younger, in a military uniform. Next to him stood Stanley, also in uniform with captain's stripes. We served together, Stanley said, even before Operation Needle. Grant saved my life on an overseas mission. Since then, I've been in his debt. Information confirmed, the voice in the earpiece sounded again. Werner Stanley, former intelligence agency employee, now works for a private security firm. Connection to the Blake case being checked. Why didn't you contact the police? Camille asked. If Grant is in danger. Because we don't know who we can trust. Stanley shook his head. Blake has bought many people in various structures, even in the DEA. Don't let him provoke you, Tanner said in her earpiece. He's trying to confuse you. I don't have the stick with me, Camille finally said. It's back home. I have to go get it. No time. Stanley stood up. Blake. He set a deadline for midnight. After that, he'll start sending Grant to you in pieces. Camille shuddered at those words. Then let's go to my place, she suggested. It's not far. All right, Stanley agreed. But not in your taxi. I have a car with a driver. He suspects something, Foss said in the earpiece. Be careful. I need to notify the taxi driver, Camille said, standing up. I called him through an app. He'll be waiting. I'll notify him myself.
Stanley walked to the door. Stay here.
He's going to Klimov. Tanner's voice was tense. Prepare for the raid. Camille remained alone in the office. What to do? Flee, but where? And what if Stanley was telling the truth and Grant really was in danger? Suddenly, her gaze fell on Stanley's computer. The screen was not locked. Perhaps there was some information there. She cautiously approached the desk and looked at the monitor, opened emails, some documents, and a photo. Recent, judging by the date, from today. It showed Grant beaten, with bound hands in a dark room, and next to him stood Stanley, and they were both smiling at the camera. A staged shot, or? Camille turned ice cold. Maybe everything was much more complicated than it seemed. At that moment, the door flew open, and Stanley appeared on the threshold. His face had changed. Now there was nothing friendly in it. An interesting profession you have there, taxi driver, he said, and in his hand, a pistol glinted. With a police lieutenant's ID and a service weapon in the glove compartment. Raid. A shout came through the earpiece.
All units, commenceret.
Gunshots and shouts were heard outside. Stanley flinched towards the window, and at that moment, following an instinct, Camille ripped the silver needle from her bag and plunged it with all her might into Stanley's hand. He cried out in surprise and pain. The pistol fell to the floor. Camille lunged for the door, but Stanley intercepted her and grabbed her by the hair. Stay put, he roared.
You're not going anywhere.
He couldn't finish speaking. The door was forced open with a powerful shove, and men in black uniforms with police written on them stormed into the office. Stanley was thrown to the ground, his arms twisted behind his back.
Mrs. Reimer, are you all right?
Tanner ran to her. Yes, she gasped for breath. But Grant, there's a photo on the computer. He's in danger. Tanner rushed to the computer, quickly scanned the photos. These are staged shots, he said. Look, here you can see the edge of a green screen. That's Photoshop, and a bad one. So Grant isn't with Blake? Camille felt her legs give way.
I'm afraid not.
Tanner supported her by the elbow. But we'll find him. And now you need to get out of here. The operation isn't over yet. He led Camille outside, where police cars with flashing lights were already crowded. Lieutenant Klimov stood by his Toyota, wiping blood from a gash above his eyebrow. Are you still alive? Camille asked. I'll live, he grinned. Good thing I have a thick skull. What's going on here? She turned to Tanner. Who are all these people, and where is Grant? Stanley and his people work for Blake, Tanner explained. They wanted to get their hands on the stick with the evidence, and your husband. He couldn't finish speaking. From the darkness, a figure emerged, and before them stood the woman from the airport, the same one who had sold Camille the silver needle. Did it all work out? She asked, turning to Tanner. Did you get them? You. Camille froze in astonishment. You know Tanner? Of course, I know him, the woman scoffed, and her voice suddenly lost its characteristic accent. We've been working together for 10 years. This is Delaney Holt, Tanner introduced her. One of our best investigators. She's been shadowing you since the airport. So, meeting her wasn't a coincidence. Camille felt an inner chill. It was all a setup, just like everything else. I'm very sorry, Camille. Tanner placed a hand on her shoulder. We've been watching your husband for a long time. He's been working for Blake for many years. He distributes drugs under the guise of nootropics, launders money through shell companies. But he said he was an undercover agent. That's a lie, Tanner shook his head. Grant made up that story when he realized he was about to be exposed. He wanted to use you to get the evidence and destroy it. And the silver needle? Camille took out the needle from her bag, the one that had just saved her life. What was that for? That was a way to make you search, Delaney explained. We knew there were drugs and documents hidden in the apartment, but we needed you to find them yourself, otherwise we wouldn't have had a legal basis for a search. So this was all? Camille made a sweeping gesture around her. Staged from the beginning? My missed flight? No. Tanner shook his head. That was a lucky coincidence. We had planned to act later, when you returned from your mother's. But when you missed the flight, we decided to seize the moment. Camille looked at them in silence. Her whole life was collapsing before her eyes. Her husband was a criminal. She was used as a pawn in someone else's game, and the man she had thought was an old family friend had been watching her all along. Where is Grant? She finally asked. We don't know yet, Tanner confessed, but we'll find him soon. Stanley will become talkative when he realizes he's facing a life sentence. The arrested individuals were led out of the building, about 10 people, including Stanley and the store clerk, all in handcuffs with grim faces. And Blake? Camille asked. Will you catch him too? Absolutely, Tanner nodded. Thanks to you, we now have all the evidence. The stick you found contains the drug cartel's accounting for 5 years. Names, sums, addresses of labs. It's the end for Blake. Camille watched the commotion of the arrests and felt a strange emptiness within her. Just this morning, she had a normal life, a job as a music teacher she loved, a husband she thought she knew. Plans for the future. And what will become of me now? She asked softly. You'll be taken home, Tanner said. Tomorrow you'll have to give a statement, and then? Then you can start a new life, without lies. Camille nodded. A new life without lies. Perhaps that was for the best. Suddenly, she remembered her mother, waiting for her in Boston, the birthday she had missed, how she wanted to tell her mother everything. But what should she tell her now? May I call my mother? She asked Tanner. Of course, he handed her his phone. But for now, don't tell her anything that happened for your own safety. Camille dialed the familiar number. After a few rings, the familiar voice answered, Hello, Mom, it's Camille. She choked back tears. I'm coming tomorrow on the first flight, and I'm coming back for good. Can I stay with you for a while? What happened, my child? Concern was in her mother's voice.
I'll tell you later. Camille vipet ave a tir.
It's a long story. When she finished the call and returned the phone to Tanner, she suddenly felt a strange relief, as if a heavy burden she had carried all these years had suddenly disappeared. Perhaps it wasn't so bad to start over again, to return to Boston, to her mother, perhaps to teach music again. That had always been her true calling, which she had given up when she married Grant. She looked at the silver needle she still held in her hand. Test your husband, and you will understand everything. Well, she had tested him, and now she truly understood everything. 3 months had passed. Camille sat at the piano in the music school in Boston, listening as her new student, a girl about 10 years old, diligently played the melody of Fur Elise. Sunbeams fell on the keys, making them gleam like pearls. Outside, the leaves of the linden trees rustled. Well done, Eliza, Camille smiled when the girl finished. But next time, pay attention to your left hand. It's a little behind. When the student had left, Camille went to the window and took a deep breath. Life was gradually normalizing. After everything that had happened, she had decided not to return to her old apartment. It had to be sold. Too many difficult memories were associated with it. Instead, she bought a small 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood of Boston, not far from her mother's house, and returned to music teaching, her true calling, which she had once given up for her husband. Grant was never found. After the raid on Stanley's warehouse, he had vanished as if into thin air. Rumor had it that he had managed to flee abroad. Perhaps to Thailand or Bali, where Blake had connections. Blake was arrested 2 weeks later at his country estate. Now he was awaiting trial, which promised to be spectacular. High-ranking officials and businessmen were involved in the case. Camille did not follow the news about the case. She had decided to let go of the past and move on. Sometimes at night, she still dreamed of Grant, as he had been at the beginning of their relationship. Young, smiling, with dimples on his cheeks and an honest gaze. Had he been a criminal even then, or had life broken him later? It no longer mattered. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from Tanner Maxwell. Hey, if you have time, check your email. Sent you something interesting. Camille opened her email and saw a message from Tanner with an attached video file. Found this on one of Blake's servers. I think you should see it. She clicked on the file. Grant appeared on the screen, tired, emaciated, with dark circles under his eyes. He sat in a dark room and spoke directly into the camera. Camille, if you're seeing this video, then it's all over. I don't know what they told you about me. Probably the worst. And they'll be right. I really did work for Blake, really distributed drugs. I betrayed everything I once believed in. I betrayed you. He sighed heavily and continued. But there's one thing I didn't betray. My love for you. That's the only real thing in my life over the last 15 years. I met you by chance, but I genuinely fell in love with you, and that's why I couldn't completely become the monster I was supposed to be when I worked for Blake. Grant paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When they recruited me in college, I thought it was just temporary. Easy money, interesting work. Then it sucked me in, like quicksand. And by the time I wanted out, it was too late. Blake doesn't let his people go, but you were my light, Camille. By your side, I remembered the kind of person I once wanted to be. He smiled sadly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. There can be none for people like me. I just want you to know. Everything that was between us was real. At least on my part. Be happy, Camille. You deserve better. The video ended. Camille sat there, staring at the dark screen. What was it? A final attempt at manipulation, or a sincere confession? The truth, she would never know now. The phone vibrated again. Tanner, what do you think? Camille hesitated, then typed a reply. Thanks for sending it. Now I can finally close this chapter. She left the school and walked slowly down the street, enjoying the warm June evening. Ahead lay dinner with her mother, who proudly introduced her returned daughter to everyone, then a rehearsal with the community orchestra Camille had recently joined, and perhaps a cup of tea on the balcony before bed, overlooking the night city. As she passed a souvenir shop, She noticed in the window a silver brooch in the shape of a needle with an unusual eye-like opening, much like the one with which this whole story had begun 3 months ago. Camille stopped, looked at the brooch, then smiled and walked on. In her handbag, in a small velvet pouch, she still kept the same silver needle that the mystic Delaney Holt, to be precise, had given her. The police had wanted to confiscate it as evidence, but for some reason, they had changed their minds. Keep it as a memento, Tanner had said back then, and she had kept it. This needle had changed her life, helped her see the truth, no matter how bitter. It had opened her eyes to many things she hadn't wanted to see. It had helped her understand who she really was and what she wanted from life. Camille walked down the street, feeling free for the first time in a long time. 15 years of a marriage built on lies were behind her. Ahead lay a new life, her own life. And even if it hadn't started as Camille had planned, it was a real life, without falsity, without deceit, without hidden compartments under the floorboards. The needle found the heart. She remembered the enigmatic phrase from Grant's video message. Perhaps that was exactly what had happened. The silver needle had found her heart. A real, living heart, capable of starting over despite everything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, Clara's Tales. Your support inspires us to bring you new and exciting narratives daily. If you appreciate our work and want us to continue producing stories like this, please consider a small donation. Every contribution greatly helps us stay creative and create new content for you. Thank you for your generosity and all the best.